The Kinsect Glaive is one of the most unique weapons ever introduced in the Monster Hunter series, but also gaming as a whole. The Kinsect Glaive is very reminiscent of a bow staff, but also a halberd, but we also have a Kinsect partner, which is capable of buffing our hunter, inflicting a status ailment on the monster, knocking them out, and even cutting the monster's tails for us. If you're new to the channel or not subscribed, yo, what's up? I'm Tara. I'm a Monster Hunter veteran who's played the series for 20 years, but I'm also a weapons expert as I play every single weapon in the Monster Hunter series. The Kinsect Glaive in Monster Hunter Wilds has actually seen a lot of changes. This has always been a weapon that has a lot of depth to it because of the Kinsect that we can raise and nurture, but we also got access to a new form of fighting with the Glaive part of the Kinsect Glaive. One thing does remain true though, the Kinsect Glaive truly is one of the most free-form weapons in the Monster Hunter series, as it has access to great damage on the ground, but this is also a weapon that's also capable of taking to the skies at a moment's notice. This is truly a weapon of heaven and earth, and combining both in the Monster Hunter series makes you an absolute god with this weapon. Throughout this guide, I'm going to take you through the training area, and I'm going to show you everything that the Kinsect Glaive has to offer, but I'm also going to teach you about different Kinsects and what they do respectively. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider it. We're on our way to a huge goal of 100,000 subscribers, and every little bit helps. But you'll also be notified of any guide content that I put out, as I plan to make a guide for every single weapon in the Monster Hunter series, but also teach you everything that Monster Hunter Wilds has to offer in general. But without further ado, let's get into the training area. Before we get started with Kinsect Glaive combos, we actually need to talk about the Kinsect itself. The Kinsect actually can have a lot of different properties depending on the Kinsect that you're using, as there's all kinds of Kinsect upgrades that actually changes the form of them physically, but also gives you different properties per Kinsect. Now we're going to get into different forms of the Kinsect later and their own special buffs, but for now I'm going to teach you how the Kinsect works in battle that is universal amongst all Kinsects. First things first, let's talk about the Kinsect gauge in the top left. On the very left is an unlit beetle icon. This is the current status of your Kinsect, and that yellow bar next to it on the right is actually a stamina gauge for the Kinsect. Now I'm going to go over controlling your Kinsect in a little bit, but for now, I'm going to demonstrate the stamina gauge being used. As you can see, the Kinsect stamina gauge is slowly draining. Whenever your Kinsect is out, its stamina is always constantly being used. If you don't control your Kinsect, it'll come back to you after a while though automatically. Whenever it's on your arm resting, the Kinsect actually recovers its stamina. Now let's talk about the gauge on the very right of the stamina meter. These 4 diamonds with the numbers 1, 2, and 3 are actually different buffs that can be applied to your hunter. The way the Kinsect works with Kinsect Glaive is it can extract buffs from the monster itself and bring them back to you. To show an example of grabbing an extract, I'm going to grab this red buff from this monster. The Kinsect is now highlighted red, and then top left, you'll actually see that the Kinsect with the beetle icon has the number 1 icon and a red buff on half of the beetle. Kinsects in Monster Hunter Wilds can actually carry up to 2 buffs at a time, and sometimes 3 under the right circumstances. For now, we also got an orange buff as well. If we call our Kinsect back, or if our Kinsect comes back to us automatically, you'll see that the buffs in the top left actually got transferred to our hunter. We now have what is known as the red buff and the orange buff. If you ever want to see what buffs do with the Kinsect Glaive, you can actually access your menu, scroll over to the info tab, and go down to the play guide. From there, select weapon controls, and take a look at Kinsect Glaive here. From there, we want to scroll over to the right once, and go down to extracts and extract effects. Extracts. A substance extracted from monsters. There are 4 kinds: red, white, orange, and even green. The color you can extract differs depending on the parts of each monster. Absorb gathered extracts by recalling your Kinsect. Each color grants a different effect, but multiple colors at once will yield even more effects. It also says that the effects end after some time. The extract buffs actually differ depending on how long they last on your hunter. But now let's take a look at what the effects actually do. The red buff allows you to charge your circle attacks. The white buff increases movement speed and jump height. The orange buff gives you slight negation of knockback while your weapon is drawn. And there's also combinations down below, where the red and white buff combined gives you extra attack. The white and orange increases your defense, and all 3 of the buffs at the same time actually give you a myriad of buffs. Now that we know what kinds of buffs there are to extract, let's talk about how to extract them from monsters. Whenever you hold the right trigger on any controller, looking around with your reticle actually tells you what buff you'll extract if you shoot your Kinsect out. But how do you shoot your Kinsect out? Well, you press the triangle or Y button at any moment. You can also press the circle or B button to recall your Kinsect of your own accord. You actually don't have to wait till your Kinsect gets back though. You can actually control it with the Y and the B button, or the triangle and circle button respectively. Wherever you actually aim your reticle is where your Kinsect will go, unless it collides with a wall or something. Now taking a look at the monster again. Red buffs are typically extracted from the head of a monster. The training dummy is a little bit hard to understand, but the head of the monster is actually this thing that hits you whenever you have the training settings altered. The orange buff is typically on the body of the monster, and white buffs are typically the wings of the monster. But since monsters do vary on whether they have wings or not, or their actual body types and sizes, the sure way to know what buff you'll extract is by holding the right trigger and just taking a look at the monster. From here, as I talked about before, we can send our Kinsect out to extract a buff. Our Kinsect will attack automatically if it collides with something it can hit. And then we can recall it ourselves. And just like that, we have the red buff. What's interesting about the Kinsect Glaive is that you can actually charge your Kinsect before you fire it from your arm. If you hold down the triangle or Y button while holding down the right trigger, you'll see that your Glaive actually starts to glow white on the end of it. Firing it off will actually allow your Kinsect to pierce through monsters and collect multiple extracts at the same time. And of course, we can recall it to gain all of these buffs at the same time. You'll even notice in the top left, the beetle icon actually gains the ability to grab 3 extracts at the same time when I fire my beetle. This special ability to grab 3 buffs at the same time is from this Kinsect boost Harvest Extract on our Cold Drone. Most if not all early game Kinsects actually come with the Harvest Extract ability, which is the ability to grab 3 buffs at the same time when we charge our Kinsect. So it's up to you to pay attention which Kinsect boost actually comes with Harvest Extract and what comes with a different ability. While we are on it though, I'm going to talk about the Extract boost as well. The Cold Drone, for instance, which is a beginning Kinsect, also has the Extract boost Recovery. Whenever you grab a green extract from a monster, it's actually a one-time heal, and Extract boost Recovery actually amplifies the potency of it, but it also amplifies the potency of some other healing that the Kinsect Glaive can do as well. So to finish off understanding an Extract boost with the Recovery, let's actually talk about the attack type of Kinsects itself, this one being a Severing type, and Kinsect Powders, which this one also has a Poison type. The Severing attack type and the Kinsect Powder of Poison only apply to the Kinsect itself, not your Glaive. Then that's how different Kinsects actually start to differ. Now let's give an example of a powder actually triggering from a Kinsect. Before we talked about sending your Kinsect out with the right trigger. But if we actually press the R1 or the RB button with it, in the top right it says Kinsect Fire. This is actually a way to mark a certain part of the monster yourself that you want the insect to attack over and over. When you do this, the Kinsect will actually attack the marked spot, but will also leave the dust or the powders that we talked about on the Kinsect itself. As you recall, this one was a Poison type. So as you'll see, when it attacks the marked spot, it actually created a poison cloud. We can also mark other parts of the monster and get multiple out at the same time. Firing the same mark that actually marks a monster for your Kinsect, but if you aim it at a dust cloud, it'll actually trigger it automatically for you. We can also press the right trigger ourselves to actually attack with our Glaive and mark a monster. Attacking these powders yourself will actually trigger this poison effect. Hitting enough of these powders will actually poison monsters. As you can see now, the training dummy is actually poisoned. This is only through the Kinsect that we're using itself though, because remember, this is not actually a poison Kinsect Glaive whatsoever. The Bone Staff has no element on it. This is also a Severing attack type Cold Drone, which means that the Kinsect itself is actually capable of severing tails. Now instead of the Cold Drone with the Severing and the Poison type, let's actually talk about a different Kinsect, which is also the other beginner Kinsect, known as the Maul Drone, which actually has a Blunt attack type and a Recover Kinsect Powder. It also has the Extract Boost Recovery and Harvest Extract Kinsect Boost for gathering multiple buffs at the same time. Marking certain parts of the monster will get us the same powder effect. Now you can see green powders actually triggering because that is actually a Recovery type Kinsect Powder. Now showing you the Recovery Powder in effect, you'll see the heal happen in the top left after attacking these. But don't forget, you can also grab green extracts as well to also get a little bit of healing. It's also worth keeping in mind that healing can be a lot better when you're in the end games of Monster Hunter Wilds with your Kinsects. There is one more thing I want to show an example of with this Kinsect itself, the Maul Drone. As I said, this is actually a base Kinsect. The attack type on this one is actually Blunt. As I talked about before, the other one was Severing, but this one actually has the ability to knock out monsters after a period of time. Slowly but surely, you can get a knockout with Blunt type Kinsects. Now that we've talked about the Kinsect itself in depth, let's talk about actual attack combos with the Glaive. Now there's actually different attack combos depending on whether you have the required buffs or not with your Kinsect Glaive. First, let's talk about not having any buffs at all. Pressing on the triangle or Y button up to 3 times in succession will get us a Rising Slash combo, into a Reaping Slash, and into a Double Slash. After attacking with the Rising Slash, the Reaper can actually be changed into a Sidestep Slash if you hold in a certain direction. But from there, it ends in the double slash all the same. You saw we can go to the left, we can also go to the right, we can also move backward, and we can also hold the stick forward, although it doesn't really move your hunter anywhere. Now let's talk about circle or the B combos. We can press circle or B to get a wide sweep. This can be followed up into an overhead smash. Pressing the circle or the B button while holding back on the stick will get us a dodge slash. If we do it in the middle of the triangle or wide combo, it'll result in the wide sweep. However, if we actually finish the triangle or wide combo and then press the circle or B, we will get the overhead smash. If we also move with the Kinsect Glaive and press our primary attack button, we'll also get the sidestep slash, but we'll actually traverse a far distance. This is a good combo starter to actually get in and to complete your combo. We can also move in a direction and press the circle or B button to get a leaping slash, which also can be followed up into the overhead smash. Kinsect Glaive is actually very specific with the focus mode. Doing attacks while we are in focus mode actually sends our Kinsect out while we attack. So doing the rising slash combo will send our Kinsect Glaive out from a neutral state in a very particular direction. Since we can also strafe in focus mode, we can also do our side attacks as well, which also shoot our Kinsect in the direction that we are moving. For instance, our Kinsect will fly out and attack from the right, moving to the left. So the way we're moving is the way our Kinsect will attack as well. So now if we want to attack the left side of the monster and we're moving to the right, our Kinsect will also move to the right as well. This can also be done by holding backward as well, or moving forward. And pressing the triangle or Y button in a flurry of attacks while holding our focus mode will also send our Kinsect out in certain ways. As you can see, our Kinsect can actually grab multiple buffs whenever we're doing this. Something to note as well is when we do a combo ender, our Kinsect will actually get the Harvest Extract boost, meaning he can grab 3 buffs at the end of a combo. In the top left you can see, it's now able to obtain 3. But starting it, it's only 2, and only upgrades as we finish this. Kinsect attacks can also be done with the circle or B button, except for the wide sweep. The wide sweep doesn't land us anything, but following up with the overhead smash will. And of course, as before, we can also do the leaping slash while in focus mode to also get Kinsect attacks. And we can also do the dodge slash. Now let's talk about another unique property of the Kinsect Glaive, which is actually the ability to go into the air. Glaive vaulting into the air is done by holding the right trigger and pressing the X or the A button. From there, we can actually do a myriad of things in the air. We can press the triangle button to get a jumping advancing slash. We can press the B or circle button to actually fall down in the air and do a jumping slash. And we can also press the X or A button to actually dash again. Depending on the direction that we're holding, we'll also get the attack in the certain direction. So if we want to go to the left after a pole vault, and I press the triangle or Y button, I'll go left. Same goes for the dodging as well. If I want to go backward, we can go backward. We can even go backward and then forward again. In the air, you can also press the right trigger to also mark a monster, just like before. And just like on the ground, we can also press the right trigger and the R1 or the RB button to also mark from a distance. I'm going to get onto focus mode later, but we can also do a focus attack on the ground, of course. In the air, we can also do it, however. And that nearly wraps up all the aerial stuff we can do with Kinsect Glaive without buffs. But there is one more thing I need to talk about. We can actually stay in the air for a very long amount of time. The longest we can stay in the air is by doing one vault and pressing the triangle or Y button. However, if we actually collide on a monster with the triangle or Y button, we actually get an extra little vault which resets the combo. Our hunter will automatically vault into the air. And from there, we can keep vaulting and pressing the triangle or the Y button. But you'll actually notice that all of this takes stamina whenever we're in the air. A vault and a triangle or Y button takes stamina. Now there is actually a limit to these air jumps. We can actually only get 3 free air jumps after these attacks. The 4th one actually doesn't get us anything at all. Now let's talk about grabbing buffs with the Kinsect Glaive and how we can get extra attacks. Now combos actually get altered depending on the buffs that we have. But first let's circle back to the buffs and what they do once more, as it's going to be key to understand what actually alters your combos. First let's talk about the orange buff. Without the orange buff, we actually get knocked back from weak attacks. However, if we collect the orange buff and bring it back to our hunter, you'll actually notice that we withstand the attacks. Next, demonstrating the white buff, our movement speed also increases, as well as our pole vaulting height. So as you can see, we jump about this high, and we're about this fast. But you'll see our movement speed visually increase. And we jump much higher. And finally, grabbing the red buff actually gives us the ability to charge our circle or B attacks. There are two different levels of charge. Letting go before hitting the first level just results in a white sweep. Letting go after the first level nets us a good amount of damage, about 52 with this bone Insect Glaive. But getting the full final charge gets us more damage. Another thing about Insect Glaive is that we can also charge it while in the air, getting us a special descending slash that also actually marks the monster for us for the Kinsect to get us some powders. The Kinsect also grabs a myriad of buffs as well. Now let's get into the combinations of buffs. Going back to the weapon controls under the play guide, taking a look, the red and the white buff combined actually increase your attack stat, while the white and the orange increases your defense. And of course, the combination of all three actually gives us the ability to alter some of our attacks, reduce wind pressure, tremors, and roars, but also further increases our attack. So in order, let's go red-white, then white-orange, and red-white-orange, as I demonstrate for you. Grabbing the red buff, and the white buff after that, watch as our attack increases as the Kinsect comes back to us. We're sitting at 341. And just like that, we're at 375. Now showing off the orange and the white buff, we're sitting at 71 defense right now, as you can see. It's not as good as the attack buff, but watch as our defense increases from this as well. Now I'm back to having red and the white buff, sitting at 375 attack. Let's get our final extract with the orange buff and watch our attack increase even further. Going from 375, we go up to 392, so it's a lot more damage having all three buffs. But now that we have all three buffs, we actually get strong versions of all of our attacks. So we can do the strong rising slash combo with the triangle or Y into the strong reaping slash and strong double slash. You can see they've actually been literally altered. The same applies for the circle or B attack combos as well. We have a strong wide sweep, which also goes into a strong tornado slash. It actually upgraded from the overhead smash into that. You'll notice that the leaping slash with the B or circle actually remains the same, as well as the dodge slash if we hold backward and press circle at the same time. Our aerial attacks actually also got altered as well. Pressing the triangle or Y button will actually get us a flurry of attacks now, which still ends in an extra vault. But of course, it still does end after the fourth attack. Our circle or B button has also been altered in the air. Now before we move on to focus mode, let's actually talk about one final attack you can do with the Insect Glaive. And this is a special attack you can only do when you have all three extracts, but it also consumes all of your extracts prematurely. After we do the strong descending slash, the charge attack with the glaive, whether we do it on the ground or even from the air, we can press and hold the left trigger and press the circle or B button to get what is known as the rising spiral slash. Now you may have noticed it, but let me show you one more time. In the top left, you'll notice all of our buffs go bye-bye as soon as we use it. But as we do this attack, our Kinsect also flies in a flurry, grabbing more extracts after that as well. So in that attack, I was able to grab the white and the green buff. Now it's actually hard to understand where you want to do the rising spiral slash to get all your buffs back, but it is indeed possible to get all of your buffs in one go. Right there, for instance, we were able to get it. Now let's talk about a counter option with the Insect Glaive. The Insect Glaive actually has access to an offset attack. During the very first swing of your charged Insect Glaive attack with the red buff is actually the ability to offset monster attacks. From there is actually no follow-up with the Insect Glaive, but it is nice that it has it. Something to note, however, though, is that this is actually extremely hard to time. So if you did watch this guide and are trying to get yourself in the training area but just can't get the hang of it, Trust me when I say that it is an extremely hard thing to do. And if you think that there's something that you missed, there probably isn't. This thing is actually extremely hard to time, and the only reason I'm able to get it right now is because I practice this a lot. Something to keep in mind is that if you try to do it close, you're actually going to have a hard time hitting it. It's best to stay a good distance away from the monster and try to time it properly. Now let's cover focus mode with the Kinsect Glaive. We already went over focus mode a little bit with the attacks. Focus mode is extremely useful, and using your Kinsect stamina itself without controlling it, like a puppet, to get attacks while you attack, which also deals damage from your Kinsect, but also grabs buffs for you at the same time, meaning you can get all 3 of your extracts pretty easily, which also just further increases your attack power and your insect itself. Since that was a pretty good example of how strong it can be, let's talk about the actual focus attack. The Kinsect Glaive's special ability with its focus attack is actually the ability to get all 3 extract buffs at the same time. You'll notice our Kinsect, when it fires off from our arm, collects all 3 for us. Now that's about as easy as it is doing the focus attack, but what is interesting is that if we actually do the rising spiral slash, we expend all of our buffs, but because we're in the air and we can do a focus attack in there, we can get all of our buffs back. You can actually just keep repeating this as long as you have wounds to attack. Let's talk about sliding and jumps. I'm actually only going to show one little attack when we're doing our first sliding attack without buffs for the Kinsect Glaive. Pressing the triangle or Y button, we get us the jumping advancing slash, which is exactly the one from our normal vault, which lifts us into the air. From there, you can pretty much guess that all of the attacks that we do with our buffs are actually the upgraded versions. So let's talk about those. Of course, again, pressing triangle or Y will get us the powered up version. Pressing the right trigger actually unsheathes our weapon for us and sends our Kinsect out. And of course, we can also jump out of a slide, but that ends it all the same. You can also press the right trigger out of a jump to get an aerial mark. Now, ledges are actually the same. If we're in a sheath state and we press the triangle or Y button, we get the same stuff. Then pressing the R2 button, we get an aerial mark. In an unsheathed state, everything remains the same, but we can now press the circle or B button to get the strong jumping slash. And I forgot to mention it from before with the sliding, but you can also do a ranged aerial mark as well. Now that we've covered nearly everything there is to know about Kinsect Glaive with its attacks, let's talk about how I like to get started with Kinsect Glaive and go into some of the best damaging combos, as well as some advanced techniques. First off, when running at a monster, you can press the right trigger or the R2 button to send your Kinsect out automatically, but also unsheath your weapon. You can gain an extract pretty easily depending on where you're focused with your camera. Now, marking monsters is also very important, but what is most important, I think, is getting your buffs right away. So what I like to do is I do like to charge my Kinsect down and fire it off right away to get that piercing effect. From there, you can normally get about 2 buffs, and from there, it's all about just hitting one more by marking a monster and getting that final buff to get your combos going. From there, using the focus mode is extremely important to get those extra attacks with your Kinsect, of course. But also, as we talked about before, it's also important to go into the air and get the strong descending slash from here to also mark the monster and have your Kinsect also pierce through. Now, the truth about Kinsect Glaive is this is actually a very free-form weapon. But when it comes to mid-air attacks, the damage actually isn't very great. That is, unless you do the strong descending slash, which does pierce through monsters with your Kinsect. What is better is actually grounded attack combos with your Kinsect Glaive, doing your primary attacks, but also finishing with strong descending slashes. And from there, we like to go into the rising spiral slash. If we don't get all of our buffs, we can also hit a wound. And just like that, we are called back to us. But by far, the strongest thing you can do for combos with the Kinsect Glaive is to indeed do your strong descending slash after a primary attack combo, while using your Insect in the focus mode. Now, there is one final thing that I need to go over now, which a lot of you who already play Kinsect Glaive probably already know of, and it is quite a conundrum in Monster Hunter Wilds. Holding the circle or the B button allows us to charge our Kinsect Glaive. But what you may not know is that you can attack with your primary attack button with the triangle or Y button while it's charged. This is a little bit tricky for controller players because to hold down the circle or the B button, you have to use your right thumb. But because you're holding down the circle button, it's also kind of hard to press the triangle or Y button. It's also extremely hard to move your stick as well, which also requires your right thumb as well. Now, I do have to apologize for beginners who are looking for a fix for the buttons or the controls or how to actually better use Kinsect Glaive because this is such a conundrum. I'm very sorry to say I don't have a fix. I think it's very player dependent of what you're actually capable of with your hands and your fingers and what you're comfortable with. For many players who know or don't know, I actually use the claw technique, using my index finger to press some of the buttons for me on the right side of my controller. This is something that every player is going to need to figure out individually, I believe, until Capcom comes up with a better fix. Now, before finishing up this guide, there is one more thing I need to talk about with Kinsects. Kinsects actually have different levels, and these orange square nodes here actually indicate what level that they are at for their stamina, speed, power, and powder effect, respectively. We're going to take a look at the smithy in a second, but for instance, raising your Kinsects can actually increase some of the effects. If we go down below and look at this Lady Charge, it actually has a boost to its stamina, as you can see here. But certain glaives themselves also come with the Kinsect level on the glaive itself. The Kinsect level of the Bone Staff 1 is a level 1, and therefore our Kinsect automatically has a level 1 effect as well. But the glaive can actually boost your Kinsect's level for you sometimes under the right circumstances. The Hope Glaive 3 here, for instance, is a Rarity 3 glaive, but more importantly, it's a Kinsect level 3 as well. This actually acts as a kind of like a bypass to upgrade your Kinsect itself. So for instance, on the Bone Staff 1, this is a Kinsect level 1. And the Kinsect itself is also a level 1 on the Cold Drone itself, right? But the Hope Glaive 3 has a Kinsect level 3, which actually means that if we equip the Cold Drone with it, the Cold Drone automatically gets boosted up to a level 3, meaning a glaive can actually bypass the levels that your Kinsect is at. And one final example, finally, we're using the Hope Glaive 3 now, and because of this, it has a Kinsect level 3, and our Kinsect Lady Charge is at a level 3 of speed because of the glaive itself. This means that it's actually a lot faster, and it also has more stamina. You'll actually visually see the insect flies much faster now. This is actually extremely helpful as you progress through Monster Hunter, because starting Kinsects are pretty slow, but this gets our buffs back way faster for us. Much faster if you watch through this entire video. So pay attention to what Kinsects have lots of speed, because that's definitely what I prefer. Now let's talk about the smithy and what you can actually do with Kinsects. At the bottom of the list at the smithy or a Gemma station, you can actually manage your Kinsects. From there, you can purchase Kinsects. You can purchase a Mauldrome and a Cold Drone, which are the starting Kinsects you can use, which have the Blunt and the Recover Kinsect powder, or the Severing and the Poison types respectively. The reason why you might want to buy more Kinsects is actually because when you raise Kinsects, let's start with the Mauldrome for instance, you actually have different kinds of beetles that you can go into. You'll actually see that the Gulshad here actually has a speed and a stamina upgrade as well, but it also has the attack boost Weak Point Focus instead of an extract boost. Weak Point Focus is actually the ability to deal more damage on weak spots on monsters with the insect itself. But different Kinsects are obviously different when it comes to their powders and stuff like that. So the Lady Charge down here, for instance, actually has a Paralysis Kinsect powder, but not as much speed as the Gulshad here. So it really is up to you depending on what suits your playstyle and your needs. And if you want to knock out monsters but paralyze them as well, the Lady Charge is also great. The reason why these are all knockout is because we did start with the Mauldrome. So for instance, if we go down to the Cold Drone as well, everything here will be Severing. Now talking about actual Kinsect glaives I would recommend, I think it's actually completely acceptable to go through the Expedition tree and go to the Hope Glaive 3, because this actually comes with the Kinsect level 3, which automatically boosts your Kinsect's level for you. Another glaive I would also recommend is the Balahara Glaive, as the Balahara Glaive does come with the skill Power Prolonger. Power Prolonger, taking a look, allows longswords, dual blades, Kinsect glaive, switch axes, and charge blades to stay powered up longer, which does mean that your buffs do last longer with your Kinsect glaive. Another recommendation would just be to use the Bone Staff 2 as well, as we do get a lot of raw damage. We don't get the green sharpness, but this also does come with a Kinsect level 3 as well. Wrapping up my thoughts on the Kinsect Glaive, I truly do believe Kinsect Glaive got a huge glow up in Monster Hunter Wilds, especially after the beta test where it felt a bit lacking. Kinsect Glaive not only has access to an offset attack, but it has extremely strong damage and super freeform combos. The ability to attack with your Kinsect in the focus mode as well is also just a huge bonus. Also, the Kinsect Glaive retaining its identity to be the aerial master is absolutely amazing to have in Monster Hunter Wilds. As we all know, they were considering stripping the Kinsect Glaive's aerial abilities before the full release. The Kinsect Glaive crowd and Kinsect Glaive users truly are some of the most unique players that we have in the Monster Hunter series, but that's because this is one of the most unique weapons ever designed in action RPGs as a whole. Now, I think that this weapon is a little bit hard to get into, but I think once you get past that initial barrier, the Kinsect Glaive is actually pretty beginner friendly with its combos. But there is one thing that does need to be stated, is that the controls for this thing, they really suck, man. Capcom, please, you gotta do something about these controls. It is absolutely brutal trying to make this thing work. Now that we're at the end of this video, do you think that the Kinsect Glaive is actually a pretty complicated weapon? If you already played the Kinsect Glaive, do you think this weapon is pretty easy once you get past the initial learning phase? And do you think that the controls truly are bad in Monster Hunter Wilds for the Kinsect Glaive? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And once again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider it. I'm on my way to a huge goal of 100,000 subscribers, and every little bit helps. But you'll also be notified of any guide content that I put out, as I plan to make a weapon guide for every single weapon in Monster Hunter Wilds, but also teach you everything that Monster Hunter Wilds has to offer in general. But that is truly everything I have for today's video. Guys and gals, Terra Knights, I hope you had a good one. I'm signing off. This has been Terrorizer, and I'll catch y'all in the next weapon guide. Peace! Oh, recording while I'm sick sucks!